Thanks for joining me on DocTalk today. I'm Dr. Dan Thomson here at Kansas State University, and today's show is going to be talking about how the rumen works to digest different types of feedstuffs. My guest, Dr. Chris Reinhardt, who's a professor and Feedlot Extension Specialist for the state of Kansas. Join me here after these messages.
Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com. This segment brought to you by Kansas Regenerative Medicine. Your stem cells, your health, your life.
Dr. Reinhardt, welcome to DocTalk.
It's great to be here.
Folks, Dr. Chris Reinhardt. He is a professor and he is our Feedlot Extension Specialist here for the state of Kansas. He's over in animal science and industries, and we are going to talk about how the rumen works. And I think most of you understand what a ruminant animal is. It's, you know, a cow or a goat, but understanding how that rumen works. Dr. Reinhardt's a ruminant nutritionist, so talk to me a little bit about what the rumen is and just in general.
Well, simply put, the rumen is a huge fermentation vat. It's made up of the four chambers, the rumen, reticulum, abomasum, and omasum, and they all have separate functions, but the one we really care about is the rumen. The rumen is where all of that fermentation happens.
So when we have the rumen, and it's large, I mean, especially in some of these whole brood cows and dairy cows, and you can hold a lot of feed and a lot of, so kind of talk to me then about, you know, what are what are some of the different things going on? You say fermentation, so I assume that means microbial fermentation.
Exactly. That's what it's all about. That cow was made to eat things we could never eat and survive on because it's full of bacteria, protozoa, and fungi. And those are the critters that are actually doing all the work. Right.
So we feed the microbes first, and then the microbes, the byproducts of microbial fermentation, are what the cow lives on.
Exactly. Without those microbes, that cow would starve to death.
And so, thinking in general, so what? Kind of talk to me a little bit different between the purposes or roles or sizes or differences between bacteria, protozoa, and fungi.
Relatively speaking, the protozoa are really, really big compared to the bacteria, but they're pretty small in number compared to the bacteria.
Okay, and bacteria, what are some of the common species that we're going to be talking about then? And I think it's important for people to understand these aren't species of bacteria or protozoa or fungi that cause infection. These are good bacteria, kind of like when you see the acidophilus commercials and lactobacillus commercials. This is a whole rumen vat full of these good bacteria.
I probably wouldn't want to drink a glass full of them.
No, but
they sure do the cow a lot of good.
Right, but they aren't causing infections.
Exactly. They are there, and they're there almost from birth. As soon as that calf is exposed to the environment, starts licking itself, licking its mother, suckling, etc., they're taking in bacteria from the world, and those bacteria begin to colonize in the rumen.
Okay. Generally speaking, what are some of the, you know, when a cow ingests something, how long is it going to take for the bacteria to digest it?
That is a really good question, and it totally depends on the quality of that feedstuff. If it's a bite of corn, it takes a matter of an hour to an hour and a half before there's some substantial fermentation going on. If it's a bite of corn stalks, it could be hours and hours before that feed is mostly processed.
So, understanding that the rumen is a fermentation vat, that it has different types of good microbes such as bacteria, protozoa, and fungi, and also understanding that there are differences in the way that it can digest due to the quality of the feedstuff is vitally important. When we come back, we're going to work with Dr. Reinhardt, and we're going to discuss the difference between soluble carbohydrates and structural carbohydrates in the rumen and digestion. More after these messages.
think Blueville does a great job of being educational in nature. They answer people's questions. They do it willingly. So we really appreciate that up close and personal approach that they have and how well they listen to their customers and respond to their needs.
And they're very prompt with things that we need to have done. And so we're very pleased with the service.
It's kind of a one-stop shop for all of your gardening and landscape needs.
Support Kansas agriculture education with an AgriTag. AgriTags are available anytime at your county treasurer. They look great on cars and trucks. For more information, go online to ksagclassroom.org.
DocTalk, brought to you by Santa Fe Trail Meats in Overbrook, or visit us online at sftmeats.com.
Hey folks, welcome back to DocTalk. Dr. Dan Thomson and Dr. Chris Reinhardt, who's my friend and colleague from the Department of Animal Science and Industries, and he is our state feedlot extension specialist and a ruminant nutritionist. And so what we're talking about today is how the rumen works within the cow, that fermentation vat that's full of bacteria and protozoa that is digesting the hay, digesting the starch, to give the byproducts so that the cow can live off of those. And let's talk about digestion or rumen digestibility of, we have soluble carbohydrates and structural carbohydrates, and kind of talk to me what the difference is between those two.
Soluble carbohydrates, just like the name implies, they're very digestible, very soluble, full of starch and sugars and things of that nature. Structural carbohydrates, just like the name implies, they're there to hold the plant vertical, and they're very poorly digestible.
So give me some examples of each.
The ultimate example on the soluble side would be grain that we use for, we can eat monogastrics, pigs, chickens, but cows and feedlot cattle do very well. The structural carbohydrates would be corn stalks, wheat straw, etc. Anything that's designed to hold a plant vertical.
Okay, and so when we start to think about this, the difference in the two main substrates as far as, because both of them have copious amounts of glucose. And so when we think about those, the difference between glucose in a structural carbohydrate versus glucose in a soluble carbohydrate is what?
It's how those individual glucose units are linked together.
And one, like the starch, they have the alpha 1,4 and the structural have the beta 1,4. You think that two little words makes a difference? Double, triple, quadruples the energy availability of that feed stuff.
Exactly. Again, with the alpha 1,4, you and I can live on grain, but with the beta, we would starve to death.
We, as humans, do not have the enzymes to digest cellulose, the structural carbohydrates. So we can't go out and eat hay and survive.
Nor does the cow, actually. It's the bacteria and protozoa that do have, in the rumen, that have that enzyme necessary to break down that beta linkage.
And horses don't have a rumen, but they have the hindgut, kind of like rabbits and horses have the hindgut fermentation. So they have a fermentation vat too, full of microbes that are breaking down those linkages. It's just that theirs are located at a different spot of the anatomy.
Exact same function, just a different part of the animal.
When we think about, structural carbohydrates versus soluble, the main difference within the rumen is the byproducts given off?
Right, the byproducts and then the rate that those things are broken down.
Right, and as we mentioned earlier, soluble, you can have a cow eat corn and with an hour or two you have peak in fermentation.
Exactly, and then on the far end you've got corn stalks or wheat straw that might take a day and a half.
Yep, so understanding soluble carbohydrates, structural carbohydrates, things that are hay, roughages versus grains is important when you understand ruminant nutrition and how they break down. When we come back, we're going to talk about different types of protein sources and what happens when those hit the rumen. You're watching Doc Talk. More after these messages.
The BQA Tip of the Day, sponsored by Beringer Engelheim Vetmedica, Inc.
I'm Dr. Kip Lukasevich with Production Animal Consultation. Today's BQA Tip of the Day is proper storage of your syringes. with our processing syringes, one of the common things that we find is that the syringes are hanging on the wall, where sometimes the area can be dust filled and dirty. So the best place to actually store syringes is either in the freezer. Your vaccine syringes is either in the freezer or in the refrigerator. The reason for that is that there's nothing that grows in a freezer. It's dust-free environment. No bacteria and no mold will grow at that temperature. In a refrigerator, there can be molds that do grow, and so if we're using automatic refill syringes, just make sure that you change the tubing on those syringes at least on a weekly basis so that no mold buildup or residues form in there that will harm your vaccines when you're processing. And that is the tip of the day.
Grain sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.
Broadband has become as important to us as highways. That is why DocTalk is teaming up with NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association, and rural broadband companies like Blue Valley Telecommunications in fighting for quality broadband access through the program Smart Rural Communities.
I don't think we have any idea what's coming in the future. I couldn't have imagined 5 years ago what we're doing today. So in 2 years, I would guess there's things we can't imagine that we're going to be doing.
To learn more, visit ntca.org/smart or bluevalley.net.
Soil is the life of a farm, and for 25 years, SureCrop Liquid Crop Nutrition has helped growers produce abundant quality crops while preserving and improving the soils they steward. SureCrop offers complete soil and plant analysis with cropping recommendations, delivery direct to your on-farm storage, and quality crop nutrition custom blended for your field. Choose SureCrop for the assurance of excellence for your soil. Call today or visit their website for more information.
Buying a car shouldn't be this hard. And at Brown Chevrolet Buick in Wamego, it isn't. It's actually awesome. Whether you want a new or used car or truck, Toby's team can make the deal. Even if you want to custom order a new car or truck, Toby's team can make the deal. See Toby's team at Brown Chevrolet Buick in Wamego. We're awesome. Valley Vet Supply is devoted to providing information and professional quality products at reasonable prices.
Valley Vet Supply.
DocTalk, brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers.
Hey folks, welcome back to DocTalk. Dr. Dan Thomson here with Dr. Chris Reinhardt. We're at Kansas State University, and Dr. Reinhardt is from the Department of Animal Science and Industries, where he is the Feedlot Extension Specialist for the state of Kansas and beyond, Ruminant Nutritionist extraordinaire, Dr. Chris Reinhardt. Glad to have you on the show. And we've talked about different things with rumen digestion, and I don't think people really understand how dynamic that rumen system is. But when a cow can go out and eat grass, and then a storm comes and they can go bed down for 3 or 4 days before they have to go back out. It's kind of like the evolution of being able to live on the prairie and withstand long periods of time because they have that continuous digestion, creating nutrients from the microbes. And now we're going to talk about crude protein. Crude protein, we have 3 main sources, right?
The soluble, which we'd normally find in urea. The degradable is, a lot of people understand soybean meal, cottonseed meal, things of that nature, very degradable protein in the rumen. And then there's bypass sources of protein that really we mean escape. They go into the rumen, but they're not broken down, and we call them undegradable protein sources.
Right. So urea is 100% solubilized in the rumen.
Almost instantaneously.
Right. And it's another one of those things that without the microbes we don't we don't use.
Exactly. That cow cannot utilize urea by herself. Those microbes take the nitrogen from the urea, bind it with the carbon, and they make actual good quality protein.
Right. As microbial crude protein,
Exactly.
just the population of microbes exploding in microbial crude protein synthesis. The other thing that'll happen is that ammonia that's not utilized will go across the rumen wall, go to the liver, slap together, and we have circulating urea again.
Exactly, and that's another really critical function. You talk about that cow surviving on a hillside. She's cycling back any nitrogen that doesn't get bound up as protein. She gets a second chance at, and that's another function that's allowed her to survive all these years.
Absolutely. And so then when we move away from the non-protein nitrogen sources, and urea, the one urea rule that Dr. Preston always taught me was never feed more than 1% of diet dry matter as urea.
That's a really good rule, and in cattle grazing, really poor quality forage, we bring that way down even from there.
Right. And I think that when we, let's just talk a little bit about urea, because I think that when we look at lick tanks, when we look at lick blocks, and the amount of non-protein nitrogen in those, supplementing those on low quality forage sometimes may not be the best source.
I can feed urea as long as I've fed some soluble carbohydrates with it. And the amount of soluble carbohydrates we talked about will dictate how much urea I can use.
And those soluble carbohydrates could come in the form of molasses, they could come in the form of corn, but it's not going to be the low quality roughage.
Exactly.
Okay. Folks, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to stay on the topic of crude protein, because we still got to get into the natural protein sources when we talk about rumen degradable and bypass and what that means to supplementation in cows. You're watching DocTalk. Thanks for joining us.
This Meet the Future Veterinarian is brought to you by Zuprevo. Choose confidence. Choose Zuprevo for BRD treatment. Lindsay Hetrick grew up in Burnville, Pennsylvania on her family's dairy farm and was under the influence of her dad, uncle, and grandfather. As she was given more responsibility, she developed a particular interest in the transition cows, which led to a career focused on animal health. After graduation, Lindsay plans on returning to a dairy practice in Pennsylvania. Heinen Brothers, a fourth-generation Northeast Kansas farm family, knows how tough farming can be. Farmers helping farmers. Heinen Brothers Ag, selling and servicing crop protection products, fertilizer, anhydrous ammonia, cover crops, quality aerial and ground application. Call today to learn about our extended term financing program. 800-760-4964. HeinenBrothersAg.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. Frank Lyons from Kansas Regenerative Medicine Center here in Manhattan, Kansas. Daryl was one of our patients that we did about 7 months ago.
I dug trees by hand for years and years and years. In the process, I wore out my rotator cuff. But when I learned about this process, I thought if there was a way to get rid of this pain, then I wanted to do it. So we did it, and it worked. I'm not going to go out and dig trees with a shovel anymore, but I can do the things that I want to do now.
Well, it's been very gratifying to help people with their painful joints and other entities, and it's been especially gratifying to be able to help people who I know and have worked with and known for many years.
Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture, represents grassroots agriculture. The state's largest and most powerful farm organization stands up for its members through leadership development, agriculture education, legal defense, environmental advocacy, farm safety, and risk management. Members also enjoy money-saving benefits. To join our organization today or to learn more, go to www.kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com.
Healthy cows start with the new hired hand automatic livestock sprayer. Rancher invented to provide an efficient alternative to pour-on and injectable parasite management systems. The portable design allows cattle to treat themselves head to hoof. Strategic device placement with pass-through activation technology takes the stress out of parasite treatment for cattle and the rancher, leaving more time to tend to other vital tasks on the farm. To learn more, visit cowsprayer.com. The new hired hand makes healthy cows easy.
Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture. To join today or for more information, go to kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Hey folks, welcome back to DocTalk. Dr. Dan Thomson here with Dr. Chris Reinhardt. We did solve where my coffee mug went, didn't we?
Yes, yeah, it was a mystery, but
Yeah.
it's resolved.
It's in South Africa. And we had a visiting guest here from South Africa on the set, and he had sticky fingers, and the coffee mug went to South Africa. So, Pete, we're coming after you. We're going to get our coffee mug back. But anyway, when we talk about crude protein, we get back on the subject. Talk about crude protein. We're talking about bypass versus rumen degradable. Give me some sources of protein that are high in degradable, or just give me the example, like soybean meal and cottonseed meal. They'd be about what?
They'd be 70 to 80% degradable, highly available to the rumen microbes.
And so 20 to 30% of that crude protein would bypass or escape rumen digestion and wind up at the small intestine as the way it was ingested.
Exactly.
Now, what are some examples of more bypass?
Protein in corn typically is thought of as 50 to 60% escape or bypass protein, as well as things like feather meal and some other protein sources, really designed to be fed so that it's not available in the rumen but available downstream as true protein.
So when we're feeding some of these byproduct feeds, we should be seeing a lot of bypass protein. Now, when you start to think about, and I guess the real reason to understand this is when we have cattle, baby calves being weaned, and they don't have a functioning rumen yet, we're looking for sources of that escape protein, correct?
In some cases, yes, because we're still feeding essentially a monogastric calf.
And so when we're looking at that, and I guess anything that would be fed when we don't have a rumen, functioning rumen would be bypass. But really, we're looking to feed that baby calf when we wean them more of a natural protein source, a bypass protein source for improved gain.
Exactly, and something we've talked a lot about here on the show are high-risk calves that have come in, maybe been on the road for a day or more on maybe a little bit of low-quality forage. Their rumen is all but shut down, and we have to, for a while, think of those almost like a monogastric.
So now if I say urea, natural protein, or bypass, if I say one of these species, I want you to say which source you would prefer. Mama cow out on low quality roughage.
Natural protein.
Okay. Newly weaned calf.
Natural protein, and as well as some bypass protein.
Right. And then a feedlot steer on a finished ration, lots of grain, show steer, 90% roughage.
Urea #1, and a little bit of true protein in addition.
So understanding that, matching your carbohydrate source with your protein source is vitally important. It's been a great show, and I appreciate you being here today.
Thanks for having me on again, Doc.
Folks, Dr. Chris Reinhardt. Remember, always work with your local nutritionist. I usually say veterinarian, but on this subject, work with your nutritionist. And start to think about what you want to do for matching protein and energy. If you want to know more about what we do on DocTalk, you can find us on the web at www.doctalktv.com. Thanks for watching DocTalk today, folks. I'm Dr. Dan Thomson, and I'll see you down the road.
Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com. To see this show and past episodes of Ag AM in Kansas, go online to agamandkansas.com.